Today I'm sewing and sharing a vintage style dress, an ode to the 1950s feminine silhouette. This dress has beautiful shaping bodice darts at the front and back, a long invisible zipper, and an optional belt for a polished finish. This is the Maisel Dress, another great free pattern by Mood Sewciety. I've left the link below so you can download it, print it out, and sew along with me. Let's get started. You will need one front bodice cut on the fold from fabric and from lining, two back bodices mirrored from fabric and from lining, two side fronts mirrored from fabric and from lining, and you'll use the same pattern piece again to cut two side backs mirrored and two mirrored of lining. One center front cut on the fold and one cut on the fold from lining, and you'll use the same pattern piece to cut two center backs mirrored and two mirrored from lining. Two belt pieces cut from your main fabric, two straps cut from your main fabric, and one 24-inch invisible zipper. If you would like to use a button loop and a button for your belt closure like I do in this video instead of a buckle, you'll need a 3x1-inch strip of scrap fabric and one large button. Just a quick note on the darts for the front and back pieces. The back dart is a pretty traditional dart, and you can just trace that with a tracing wheel and tracing paper onto your fabric. But the front dart is a little bit more unique, and all they want you to do is consider your 1/2-inch seam allowance on both sides of your dart legs before you transfer it onto your fabric. So grab yourself a ruler, and for each side of this triangle marked on your pattern piece, draw a line a 1/2 inch away so that your line ends up in the middle of this dart circle that's provided on the pattern piece. Do this on both sides of the triangle. And now this red line that I've drawn is the one that I'm going to transfer onto my fabric with tracing wheel and tracing paper, as it will be the stitching guide for my dart for my front pieces. So let's start by pinning our darts for our front and back pieces. Here is my back piece, and my triangular dart is transferred onto the fabric. I'm just going to poke my needle through one dart leg and out the other and pin in place all the way down. And I'll do this for both back pieces. And now I'll pin my front darts the same way, poking my needle through one of my traced dart legs and out the other on the other side. And now we can go to our machine and sew all 4 of our darts, starting at the bottom of the garment to the point of the dart, leaving thread tails at the end of your sewing so that you could tie it in knots. I've stitched all of my darts, and for each one I've left thread tails at the end, and I'm just going to tie them in a knot a few times. Follow the same exact steps to sew the 4 darts into your front and back lining pieces. Now we're going to begin attaching our skirt pieces. Here's my center back piece, and I'm going to attach it to one of my side front pieces, matching the notches. So place them right sides together and pin this seam matching your notches. Sew with a 1/2-inch seam allowance and press your seams open. And now we'll attach the side front to the side back. So here's my center front panel, my side back panel, and now my new side front panel. So I'll place my side front and my side back right sides together. Then pin as before, sew with a 1/2-inch seam allowance and press open. Now working our way around, we're going to attach our center front to our side front, right sides together. And then pin, sew, and press in the same way. Now it's time to attach your other side front piece to your center front, making sure to match your notches, and then sew and press as before. Now attach your other side back piece to your side front piece, again making sure that you're matching your notches. And then sew and press. And then lastly, attach your last piece, the center back, to your side back. Pin in the same way, sew with a 1/2-inch seam allowance, and then press the seams open. Now repeat the exact same process to attach all of your lining pieces for your skirt, and then I'll meet you back here. Now that our skirt and skirt lining panels are all attached, we can go back to our bodice. Place your back bodice pieces on top of your front bodice piece and align the side seams. And pin in place. Sew both seams with a 1/2-inch seam allowance and press them open. and sew the side seams of your bodice lining in the same way. For the strap pieces, fold them in half lengthwise and pin along the longer edge, and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, doing this for both straps. And then trim your seam allowance and turn this right side out. And press your strap so that the seam that we created when we sewed is centered in the back of the strap. And do this for both straps. Now we can attach our skirt and our bodice together. Place your skirt and your bodice right sides together, matching the top of your skirt with the bottom of your bodice. And pin together, matching your seams and your center backs. And then sew your skirt and bodice together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Attach your skirt lining to your bodice lining in the same way. Now place the bodice of your lining and the bodice of your main fabric right sides together and pin all around the top outer layers from center back to center back. Make sure that you match your notches and your seams. Once you get to the high point of your back piece, grab one of your straps and center your strap with that piece so that it's right sides together with your right fabric, and the crease of the strap that we centered at the back should be facing you. And sandwich that within your lining and pin in place. Do this for both straps and back pieces, leaving about a 1 inch gap on each side of your front piece at the notch so that we can insert the other side of our straps later once we've turned this garment right side out. And one last thing before we sew as pinned from center back to center back is we want to put both sides of our zipper tapes on either end and catch the tops of our zippers as we sew. So open up your zipper. I want to note that the zipper teeth of an invisible zipper inherently coil to the inside. Take your zipper to the iron before we apply it and use your fingers to roll those teeth over so that the zipper is flat. And once you've rolled those teeth over, use your iron on a low setting to press those teeth nice and flat. This way you'll be able to get your sewing needle nice and close to those zipper teeth. And place the right side of your zipper right sides together with your main fabric, aligning the top of your zipper tape with the top of your fabric, and making sure that the distance between the edge of your fabric and the zipper teeth is 1/2 inch. Sandwich that between your lining and pin in place. Making sure not to twist your zipper, do the same thing on the other side. So again, the right side of your zipper tape will match the right side of your fabric, lining the top of the tape with the top of the fabric, and again measuring from the outside of your fabric to your teeth 1/2 inch, noting that the teeth of your zipper will be facing the inside of your garment. Sandwich that in between and pin. Double check that the right side of your zipper is facing down toward the wrong side of your lining and that your zipper is not twisted as it reaches from center back to center back. And now you're ready to sew as pinned from center back all the way around to center back, catching the tops of your zipper on either end. And sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, remembering also to leave the strap gaps at both sides of your front bodice. Now that the bodice lining and main fabric are sewn together at the top, clip your corners so that we get a clean corner when we turn these right side out, and also clip into all of your curves. Just clipping into the seam allowance at all the curved areas to the stitching but not through the stitching. Now we're going to understitch these seams so that when we turn it right side out, the lining fabric doesn't roll to the front of the dress. So reaching into your garment between the lining and your main fabric, you'll want to push the seam toward your lining fabric and then stitch all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from your original stitching line. Once you get to all of the corners of your dress, your presser foot will not be able to reach that corner, so just stitch as far as you can. and the stitching gaps that we left on either side of the front bodice to insert the strap later, leave the same gaps open as you understitch. So starting from your center back, begin understitching, stitching your seam allowance to the lining fabric 1/8 of an inch away from our original stitching line, stopping and starting a new stitch every time you reach one of the corners, and work your way all around the entire neckline. Now we can turn this garment right side out and give it a good press. Take the back panel of your dress with the strap and place it behind the front part of your bodice, as it will be when you wear the dress, and then insert that front of the strap into the gap that you left in your stitching. Insert it inside by about 1/2 inch and pin in place. And do this on both sides. And now take it to your machine and top stitch both straps in place to the front of your bodice. I just top stitched about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the dress, back and forth a couple of times to secure the strap, and sewing as far as I needed to just to close the gap that I'd left in my stitching. Now I'm going to place my lining and my main fabric right sides together once again along the center back seam, and pin the lining and main fabric together all the way down the zipper, sandwiching the zipper in between, just making sure that you maintain the seam allowance between the outside of your dress and the zipper teeth 1/2 inch all the way down, and pin in place. Also make sure that when you're sandwiching your zipper, that the waist seam of your dress also matches up perfectly. And once you've pinned to the end of your zipper, change to a zipper foot and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance close to your zipper teeth all the way from the top of your center back to the end of your zipper. And do the same thing on the other side, sandwiching your zipper between the lining and the main fabric at your opposite center back. And now my zipper is installed, and I'm ready to sew the rest of that center back seam from where we ended the stitching for our zipper to the bottom of the hem. So now with our main fabric only, place these main fabrics right sides together and pin all the way up. Then we're going to start sewing the rest of the seam all the way to the hem for the main fabric only, starting stitching where you stopped sewing your zipper, maintaining a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down. So move the remaining portion of your zipper that you didn't sew out of the way so that you can get your needle right there at the exact point where your stitching stopped. Now I've finished that back seam for my main fabric, and I'm going to do the same thing for my lining. So place your lining fabrics right sides together all the way down the remainder of your center back seam and pin from the end of your zipper all the way down to the bottom hem. And sew again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, moving this zipper out of the way so you can start exactly where your zipper stitching ended. And this will complete your center back seam for both your lining and your main fabric. And now it's time to hem the very bottom of our dress. I've gone ahead and serged the raw edges of the bottom of my main fabric all the way around, as well as all the way around for my lining fabric. I want the outside of my dress, the main fabric, to be longer than the lining by just a little bit, maybe 1/2 inch or so. So I'm going to hem the outer main fabric of my dress just by folding it up once and then sewing all the way around. And I'll fold it up about 5/8 of an inch and pin in place. Pin all the way around the hem of my dress. And once I've pinned all the way across, I'm going to sew the hem of my dress close to my serging stitches all the way around. And once my main fabric is hemmed, I'll hem the lining. So for the lining, I'll press it up to the wrong side by about 1 inch and pin that in place all the way around. Once you've pinned the hem all the way around for your lining, Take it to your machine and stitch once again close to your serging. And now for the belt, place both of your strips right sides together and pin both long edges. Now before I sew both of my long edges with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to create a small button loop to insert into one of the ends so that my belt will close with a button closure instead of with a buckle as shown in the illustration from the pattern. So to create my button loop, I've just cut a 3 by 1 inch scrap of fabric, and I'm going to fold both of the long edges in toward the center so that they meet, and then fold it again down the center and pin in place. And now I'm going to take this enclosed strip of fabric and edge stitch those pinned open edges. And now that I have this button loop sewn shut, I'm going to fold it in half so that the raw edges meet and insert it into one of the edges of my belt, right in the center, matching up the raw edges, and pin in place. And now I'm ready to sew the belt. So I'm going to sew both of the long edges and the short edge that has the button loop in it, all with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, keeping the other end of my belt open so that I could turn it right side out. And now you can turn this belt right side out and then give it a good press. And for the raw edges of your belt, tuck it to the inside by 1/2 inch and top stitch this opening closed. And then you can sew a button to the end opposite your loop. And then you can wrap this around the waistline of your dress with the button in the front of the dress or the back of the dress. And now we're all done with the Maisel dress.
Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe for more videos and sewing inspiration. I'll see you next time.